Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is for some giant. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
We got to take. That one there. Isn't there one there? Where did it go?
Testing 1, 2. Okay, we are just a couple of minutes late, so I'd like to get us open, and we will have an opening prayer followed by some opening remarks by our interim minister, Nicholas Griffin. And then we will go into candidate speeches. One of the things that's very different this year is that the election committee and or the election procedure committee has put up time limits on speeches and questions and answers. And the election committee has also decided that questions should be in writing, and then we will collect them and they will be read from the podium to the candidates. So on the form, please indicate your name, then whether you want your question to go to all candidates or only select candidates, and then the text of your question. I do have atrocious handwriting, but that does not mean that I can read atrocious handwriting, so please try and print neatly. Yes, Sally.
I strongly object to having the usual format of the town hall meeting where we ask our own questions and that you're changing it to severely restrict how we ask questions and how long we ask questions. This is the town hall meeting. That is for the members. It's for the members. It's our opportunity to ask questions, to get our questions answered. And it's, as the organizational chart of Unity and the bylaws show that the members are at the top of the organizational chart and above the board. And if the members want to say their questions in person and have questions continue, that's how it should be. We are electing 3 people to 3-year terms on the Board of Trustees next week. That's a huge decision for us. And to say that we should not have time to ask questions of candidates and would-be candidates, and to limit that is improper. This is our chance to speak. And I ask for the board to vote on whether to return to the format of allowing us to ask our own questions and to have the questions as long as is necessary to have them asked. If the board refuses to do that, then I ask for the vote of the members here, as the congregation is in charge of this ultimately.
Thank you very much. Your objection is noted. The Board of Trustees passed the election procedures, and in the election procedures, it was indicated the specific time frames of 3 minutes for an opening speech, 20 seconds for each question, and 1 minute. So that has already been met and discussed and adopted by the board. Okay. This is not actually a board meeting. This is a town hall meeting. Can we have a board meeting within the context of the town hall meeting to override the policy that we passed? Yes, I'm asking you.
Let me make some comment here. I don't like handhelds. What has been stated here is fundamentally... I don't like these damn things. What has been stated here by this good lady is fundamentally true. The membership holds the residue of power. They elect the board members. That's true. That's in law. They elect the board members, and the board hires and fires the minister, if necessary. What's being asked here is a legitimate question. We do have a time constraint here this afternoon. We have to be out of this auditorium by 3 o'clock. I am told, I understand that is the point. I have no objection myself to longer questions, but it is entirely true that we have a large slate here this afternoon of people, including 2 individuals who were not originally chosen to place themselves in candidacy. So I think it behooves us to move things along as quickly as possible, but I think at the same time we need to have a little bit of flexibility on that one. So while I am in favor, and this is an opinion only, and I do not want to contravene what the board has decided, because as you see from the chart, which is not correct, because it's not the congregation, it's the membership. The membership are those who have the ultimate residue of power in the church. But if the membership wants to have longer time questioning these candidates, I think that's a justifiable request. But
We ask ourselves, not in writing.
what?
Not written questions. We never had that for 10
Well,
years.
I don't know.
We
Written
always
questions-
ask our own questions.
I think what we're trying to do is, as far as I can, I've only been here 4 days. What I think we're trying to do here is expedite a process which can become unduly involved and too long. I think we understand that. But you have...
The board talked 3 weeks ago. It went as long as it needed to be to ask.
Okay.
Everybody asked their questions.
Well, let me allow me to put that back to our board president. Would you feel that it's justifiable to allow more time, perhaps less restricted time for the candidates to be questioned?
Okay. Will everyone please sit down? Okay. Well, see, this is, to me, I just as soon abandon the entire meeting at this point.
No, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
Let's remember.
I think one of the things we're lacking is that we should have opened in prayer. So shall we at least open in prayer?
You've heard already this morning my attitude towards these situations. I think it is reprehensible and shameful that a spiritual community dedicated to oneness, cooperation, and respect should have these kinds of confrontations. I think it is absolutely shameful. So let's not get into a blame game. We're all adults. We're all looking for the truth. We're all trying to express our oneness. Let's resolve this in a loving and sensible manner. Shall we try to do that? May we then have a prayer, an opening prayer. We are met here, and it's a great privilege for us to be here. And I told you why I think that this morning. It is a huge privilege for us to be here, to determine the future of this wonderful spiritual community. These are not words. This is not flim-flam. This is the truth. And we can do this with goodwill, with trust, with honesty. We can make this work. And it is shame if we don't. So we open ourselves to the inspiration and the guidance of Spirit. We have an issue here, which is a legitimate issue. Let's try now to resolve that in love, with cooperation and respect. And we ask Spirit to guide us, to give us the words and the sentiments to be able to do this as we know we should. In our hearts, we know we should. So let's set about now with the guidance, with the direction of Spirit in resolving this issue so we can get on with the hugely important job of electing those board members who will carry us forward into a future. We won't give up on the process. We'll stay here until as long as it's necessary. And we'll stay here knowing that Spirit directs and guides our words and actions. And I say that in truth and in trust, and I say, God bless us. Amen. Amen. So how do we do this?
Okay, I would like to start by saying, how did we get here? The Election Procedure Committee was formed because of what happened last year at this very town hall. where a series of questions were asked and targeted to certain individuals. That is why this election procedure committee said, nay, nay, we do not want to create that type of forum again. Then that was the election procedure committee who set up the time limits of 3 minutes for an introduction, 1 minute, 20 seconds for the question, and 1 minute for the answer. That then went to the election committee, which is about, 7 or 8? How many people are on the election committee? Six on the election committee, and in general discussions in the election committee, which is different from the election procedure committee, it was suggested by Pat Holt, why don't we have the questions in writing? Because that helps curtail several things. It helps curtail repetitive questioning. It helps diffuse any emotion because the questions will be read by a neutral party, and it will help keep the time limits of 20 seconds per question, because as we know, some people can take 45 seconds before they even ask the question. So I think that is the first thing that we have to, first of all, I guess I have to ask the board members whether they want to reconsider this policy, since they were the ones who passed this policy. So the board members, I see Jan and Jerry, Ricky, Richard, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Kathy, 5, 6. Yeah, but you would count for quorum. 7, and Debbie for 8. Okay, so we haven't, are we missing anybody? Thomas. Okay, so we have them here. Please sit down. If I can't get you to at least honor the chair, I just don't understand how we can possibly proceed. Oh, see, there you have it, don't you? We just heard from the minister that it's important to have this sort of respect. Okay, please. We're going to...
On us. If you make policies, you need to circulate them. We had the most difficult time getting that policy. The policy from the election committee or procedure, I don't know what their name is even. And I object to that. I strongly object to that. I feel like I'm being gagged, and that's probably what I object to the most.
Okay, please sit down so we can get through the vote. Please. We're trying to resolve the issue. Please.
Okay, I will sit down, and if you don't resolve the issue, then I will stand up again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. The board members, all those of the board members only, all those in favor of going back to the old format where questions are asked verbally and there is no time limit, please raise your hands.
I'm sure the ones who are running want that because this is their opportunity.
I don't see any hands being raised.
Well, they should.
Okay. So are you voting, Marcia?
Yes,
okay. For going back to the old one. All those against going against, two. Debbie and Marcia. All those against the motion to go back to the old format, please raise your hands. No, you're not on the board. 1, 2, 3. And wait, 4. Okay, it looks like the majority, yeah? Okay. Yeah.
The board is not in its full authority unless it is in session. The board has created a policy. I don't see any way that we can get around that policy right now. The policy did not actually require written questions. That's something that the election committee did come up with. But the 20 seconds and the 1-minute responses, to me, there's no way to go around that. Later, in retrospect, if we do want to make changes, let's look at it. Let's go through the committee process and advocate for those changes. But right now, the board is not able to change that policy.
Okay, down.
I don't think that anyone doesn't want to hear your questions. But you all know that sometimes these meetings have become less than pleasant. And so in order to keep things polite, this is what we decided to try this time. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then the next time we can do something different. How's that?
Joanne, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas, for your thoughts. I disagree. I don't believe it's shameful for people, myself included, to want to. You'd rather we reacted in a.
I'm just saying, if we're going to react, we should do so in a respectful and loving manner. I have no problem with disagreement whatsoever, but I just think we need to remember what our community is and the pledges we've made to address these issues in love and in respect. That's all. I'm absolutely in favor of dissension, but I believe it has to be lovingly and frankly expressed, and respectfully so.
Okay. As far as respect, Joanne, honestly, if you were not on the board, you were not board president several years ago, would you have stood for this kind of format in questioning your board candidates? Honestly.
I can see the need for it, and yes, I would have. After seeing what happened last year, if the policy came out, we need written questions. After what I saw last year, absolutely, I would see the need for it. Because what happened last year was persecutorial. And that is not fair to the people who are offering to serve this church on their own time. There were statements made that had no foundation in fact, and they were asked repeatedly. That was what spurred the election procedure committee to rethink the whole procedure about asking questions.
Can I put in my thought?
It's up to you. It's your
witnessed-
meeting. The time is being not wasted. You are choosing to spend your time on the procedure at the expense of being able to ask questions of the candidates. This meeting is going from 2 to 3, and then I am leaving. If you want to continue informally, that's another thing. But it's scheduled from 2 to 3. There's rumors about whether or not there is a following group coming on.
I'll just let go. Thank you. Thank you for the
Okay,
time.
so the board has decided to go with the existing policy. We will move forward with the existing policy. The next item is so that you will have time to write your questions. We will have 3-minute candidate speeches from each of the candidates. And I believe, where's Jack Randall? Jack Randall wanted to MC this and do it in random order. I'm sorry, they are all out of order at this point. We have got to move forward.
Hello, my name is Jack Randall, and last March you elected me, the membership elected me as alternate.
Hold the microphone closer, please. Right at your chin.
Okay, how's that? Better? Let me repeat. Last year you elected me as alternate to the nominating committee, and I'm here to represent the nomination committee in the activity that it is typically responsible for conducting, which is to identify candidates, to provide vetting process, and to introduce them for the purpose of asking questions such as we have today. Unfortunately, Reverend Tim was one of those members, and he is not here. Thomas Gallagher is the board representative to this committee, and he is traveling back at the present time. Sandra Dockham-Leong was the chairperson, and she declined to continue, and I'm here to support a communication about the process that occurred for the purpose of going through this exercise today. So, originally, the nominating committee had the belief that the only thing that it could do in terms of vetting was to determine that the candidates had a 1 year of actual membership at the church and that they had attended unity classes in order to help subscribe to the unity principles. A meeting was held with counsel. The church has a legal counsel. And it became clear, although I was not at that meeting, I'm reiterating what I understand, the church said, or the legal counsel said, no, the nominating committee has the right and responsibility to fully review any candidates that are applying to become members of the board of trustees and to make a determination who the best candidates would be. Bylaws call for a total, ideally, of at least 2 members for each open position, 2 applicants for each open position. So the applications came in. There were a total of 8 that came in. After doing the vetting process by the nominating committee, 6 names were brought forth as possible candidates for these positions. Those 6 are listed up there. I'm going to use a cheat sheet so I don't lose anybody's name. Marcia Bethards, Salim Ahmed, Chris Vaughn, Latrice, last name Latrice, Russell, Richard Hughes, and my good friend Ralph Whitaker. So those were the 6 names that proceeded out of the vetting process. Now, in addition to that, 2 other names were brought forth and discussed at the board meeting, at executive session that happened this week, and based on some conclusions about moving this process forward, it was determined that the 2 names that were not vetted by the nominating committee, namely Eric Quam and Ricky Banning, were also to be included in the consideration for the membership to vote on. That's the process that I think the committee has come to at this point. The final job of the committee at this point is to introduce those individuals and allow them to make a presentation to the congregation. It's been determined 3 minutes in length. I think that's appropriate. And then to allow additional questions to be made of those candidates. So I would like to entertain the 6 initial people to come forward initially. I have slips of paper with their names, and I'd like to just select them randomly and invite them to come forward for that purpose.
Can I raise a point of order?
Yes,
We are not presenting these for congregational approval.
that's correct.
Otherwise, we are presenting these individuals to the membership.
Sorry. I understand that distinction, Nicholas, and I agree. This is a membership decision, not a congregational decision. So the first person's name that I just drew randomly was Ralph Whitaker. Ralph, would you step forward?
Thank you. My name is Ralph Whitaker, and I'm a candidate for the board, your candidate. I'm here because I believe in and love this community. I spent 6 years on the board prior to now. 1 as treasurer, 2 terms as president. I realize that everything that a person does when they're on a board or they're in any type of committee is not going to be something that everyone likes. But I'm here for God and for God only. So if there's something, even in the questions that you have that you want to ask me about, I'll be happy to answer them, every single one of them. Because when I step forward to do something, I do it with integrity. I don't do it to please anyone. I do it because it's the right thing to do. And when I say that, back in the days when I was on the board before, there were moments that I would walk. I lived just across the street. I didn't even want to walk across the street to come over here. That's how nauseous I felt. So someone asked me this morning, why in the world are you doing this again? Or why would you want to do this again? Here's my answer. 1, in the song that we sang this morning, use me. I want God to use me in any way that God sees fit. If that is to come back to the board to help elevate this church, to bring it back to where it ought to be, then that's why I'm running. I'm not here to blame anyone for anything. But if I have to stand up, I will. Martin Luther King said, I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. I'm not fearing any man. Thank you. I've been to the mountaintop, paraphrasing, with this board. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. And I promise you that if we do the right thing here next week by voting for people whose conscience is to up-level and to bring this church back to where it needs to be, then we will get to the promised land together. I don't mind being called Reverend Ralph. Because I'll preach to you today, tonight, and tomorrow. Thank you. To let you know that my neighbor across the street said, this is Unity Church. You welcome everyone, all faiths. Yes, we do. Because the meaning of unity is to bring together, not tear apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. The next random selection I just picked up is Salim Ahmed.
Can I begin? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aloha, friends. I was born in India, raised in Pakistan, and have been in Hawaii for 40 plus years. My PhD is in agriculture. I am a Unilim, a Unity Muslim. I find perfect fit between the Quran's later verses and unity principles. My wife and I got attracted to Unity 7 years ago because of its inclusiveness, service, and camaraderie. Being inspired, I volunteered as dishwasher in the kitchen. Now I volunteer as an usher. I also organize a quarterly program called Millen at Unity, which is a program of cultural, spiritual experiences through the performing arts. My platform has 5 goals. 1, seek changes in our bylaws to accord ministers, staff, and volunteers the respect they deserve. 2, to help identify reasons we failed in this regarding Reverend Tim, and to consider steps to rectify these. I am working on a letter of apology to him, and those who may wish to are welcome to sign it. 3, devise strategies to re-attract members who've left in anguish and to attract younger people. 4, offer activities beyond worship. For example, we should produce a directory of member leisure time activities such as bridge and Scrabble, and of professional services such as babysitting and financial planning. And 5, convert our campus to solar energy. Currently, our bill is $45,000. Let me conclude by saying I'll share with you a Pakistani proverb which says, when 1 minus 1 is 0, 1 plus 1 is 11. It is the synergy that we should try to work on. Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. The next name that I've arbitrarily selected from my list is Marcia Bonita Bethards Jackson.
Right under my chin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcia Bonita Jackson Bethards. I am going by Bonita as of the new year. I love that name, and I said I'm going to use it. So my name is Bonita. I have been attending Unity Church since 2009. I love volunteering. That song that was sang today about use me, the only thing I can say is that I've been used here, okay? I like standing in the middle of the aisle and greeting people and singing and dancing. And plus, Reverend Sky told me I'll never have to sit down when I become an usher. So that's the reason why. I have been on the Ho'opono serving food in the park. I've been on 2 search committees. I've been to the prison ministry. I've been to IHS. My father and I used to volunteer and go. I've been on the election committee. Right now I'm on the finance committee. I'm still an usher. And I'm on the fundraising committee. My spiritual path continues to grow because I love Unity Church of Hawaii. We honor all faiths, and that is very important to me, to have all the different types of groups of people, and it would be an honor to serve on the board again. I feel like I have something to offer, and plus I like volunteering. Someone did ask me one time, do you know you're not getting paid? Duh, that's what volunteering is. Okay, everyone have a wonderful evening, and I have 1 minute, so thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Marcia. The next person randomly selected is Latrice Mitchell Campbell.
Good afternoon, church. My name is Latrice Marie Mitchell Campbell. I've been a part of Unity for the past 7 years. Through that time, I volunteered. My daughter has grown here. We love this community, and it's a space where I'm able to be of service. I'd like to say praise God, from whom all blessings flow, and may we all be vessels for his mission. In this space, I have served the community not only on the campus, but outside of this campus. What I can bring to your board is a voice for those who may not necessarily be visible to the majority of the congregation and of the membership. I would hope that you would choose based on what the mission is of this church. And if you are confused on what the mission is, as many times I have been myself, I invite you to ask your board members, research, do your own research, and find out what the purpose is of this space that is supposed to be a sanctuary for those who are looking for something more than what they have. Unity has brought me here, not only in my time of doing great for myself, but in times where I was in great need. And I'd like to thank those people who have been there for me on my journey. It would be an awesome opportunity to serve on the board. I am young, thank God. I have a lot to learn, but I am open to learning and being a part of a group that is for God's mission first, serving the community and being a bright light in the world. I did not prepare a speech today because I said I was going to let Spirit do what it does. So, vote for me. I love you all and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Latrice. Next name I selected was Chris Vaughn.
Thank you. Normally I would speak from my heart, but this is too important. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. This is an incredible community. It deserves the best in all of us. Thank you for the opportunity to step into my highest and best. As I speak with you today, I ask that you hear me out. I could placate you with beautiful words and sweet indulgences, but today's Spirit leads me to stand in my truth. In the last few years, my heart has ached as I have watched a small group of outspoken, opinionated members lead this precious spiritual community into a governance style marked by abuse, alternative facts, misrepresentation, bully tactics, political infighting, and a belief that the end justifies any means. These are not petty grievances, but major transgressions. We cannot just brush them aside. We have lost congregants, staff, contributions, and beloved ministers. Additionally, I have watched with dismay as our once overflowing preschool has seen a reduction in enrollment, lost applicants, and has had its once pristine reputation tarnished. This board's leadership style and tactics have destroyed the trust and goodwill that has always marked the relationship in this community. If we want to move into true oneness, we must address these grave concerns. How can we ever transcend these issues if we cannot speak the truth and face into these challenges? Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore once said, "All men who have moved the world to better things have received their inspiration from the Spirit within and have always looked to it for their instruction. My calling and instruction in this community has been to hold the high watch, to stand in integrity. I speak the uncomfortable truths." Mr. Fillmore did not deny that bad things exist. He denied their power over us. I believe Spirit has chosen to use me for this purpose. So today I am happy to say that I stand here before you with a heart full of hope. The winter is coming to an end. In the last few weeks, the congregants, staff, and parents have started to join together to share their frustrations and hopes. They have started to stand up, to speak their hearts, to hold compassionate boundaries against those whose leadership style do not match the ethics of their spiritual community. We talk a lot in Unity about Christ consciousness and being Christ-like. Sometimes we forget that Jesus Christ was a man who was also a man of peace, was also a man of action. Jesus and the early prophets and Christians were seen as disruptors of the peace. They shook up the old order and pointed out its flaws and hypocrisy. Shortly before the crucifixion, Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all that was unlike God. And he said unto them, "It is written that this house shall be called the house of prayer, but you have made it into a den of thieves." I am strong enough to stand up for what we all know is right. I don't need Unity Worldwide Ministries to tell me the difference between right and wrong, as some board members have said is necessary. I was bullied for most of my life. It has strengthened me. My mettle is well tested. I will not be bullied, nor will I allow this congregation or my fellow board members to be bullied. I will not tolerate misrepresentation, half-truths, and ethical lapses. Together, we can bring this board into integrity. This will once again be a house of prayer. You all know my platform and for what I stand. I ask for your support, and together we will shine the light of truth once again.
Thank you, Chris. Richard Hughes.
Sounds like a wrestling match. Let me start my own time. I just like to keep track of things. Okay, there's a lot going on here. You guys have my bio. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Born and raised here, second oldest of 9, 2 degrees, psychology and anthropology, University of Hawaii. I've done a lot here in the community and in many different ways, including as a chaplain of the past and a prayer letter writer. I've gotten really involved with the board in the last 2.5 years. That's probably the most important point to make. And I don't usually gravitate to board positions, but I decided maybe check up and see what I could do to add to the process. I have seen a lot and I have heard a lot. And historically, I think there are problems here, and people have been pointing to this. There are foundational, deeper issues. And we've had problems in the past where money's been misappropriated, $150,000 out of the restricted funds. We all voted for that at the last annual meeting to put it back into the fund. There's annual reviews, there's financial reviews, there's a balance sheet that's been missing for years. The school finances have not been released to the board yet in entirety. So there's a tremendous amount of turmoil caused by all of this, and the result of that form of leadership of the past is a decline in membership. We have a lot of empty chairs. Membership is probably about half of what it used to be. So what is the solution to all of these problems? A cultural shift, in my opinion, needs to happen. Culture changes when the leadership buys in and changes also. Words are wonderful. People can say anything they want. And you hear it when people get up to want, and they want votes. They're politicians. But look at what people actually do. It's clearly time for a change in leadership when you look at the actual facts of the previous 6, 12, whatever years that this church has been floundering. It takes a village, and I really appreciate that everyone is getting involved. And I think that's the future, is to be involved and learn what the facts are. What we need on the board is an even-handed candidate, someone who does not play favorites. Check their track records. I've worked very hard on the bylaws committee to make the bylaws a little more democratic, not so one person at times. So I'm trying to expand the democratic base so everybody can have more of a say-so. So please be informed, go to the source, avoid rumors. Just because somebody's saying something doesn't mean it's true. Is this the way forward? The bottom line, please come to your own opinions. There's a lot of generalities being spoken. I'll be here after the meeting. If you want specifics, come up to me. I'll be happy to talk to you. Let's place Pono individuals on the board. I thank you for your support of this church, and I'll be happy to chat afterwards. Aloha.
Thank you, Richard. And now I'd like to bring up Ricky Bannon.
Is it on? Aloha, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I was raised in a small town in Maryland with farmers and hardworking small business people, and a dad that took me outside in the middle of the eye of a hurricane to remind me that the rainbow in front of us was far more important than the temporary terrors of the storm. And Daddy used to say to us kids, if you belittle a man and you make him feel small, you'll lose his trust and he'll run away. But if you reach out and you take the time to get to know a man's heart, you might have a chance at a friend for life. And this story for me is about hurt versus heart. Our Unity Church of Hawaii is going through some deep challenges, and every day we're having to decide which way are we going to go. Are we going to take the low road? Are we going to hang out in the pain and make friends with gossip? Are we going to choose the high road and find the courage in love in prayer, in forgiveness, to reach out, to look into one another's hearts. Are we going to judge and reject? Or are we going to listen to connect? These past 2 years of board service, I've brought those values my mom and dad taught me. Values like resiliency and fairness and inclusion and transparency and healthy standards of a firm foundation. But policies and procedures and protocols only go so far, because the real deal underneath it all is the people. That's you, that's you, that's you, that's me, and that's us. I've been working with people for 40 years in my career, and whether I've been doing executive coaching in the business world or working with an incest victim in the clinical world, one thing stays constant, and that is if the person is open to change and wants healing, the magic comes in. I believe that Unity Church of Hawaii can get that magic again, and I humbly ask for your vote so that I may continue my board service to help be part of finding that magic. The fifth Unity principle says, knowing these principles is not enough. We must live the truth we know. And so I ask each of you, are you going to choose the hurt and the low road? Or are you going to choose the high road? God is here in our hearts waiting. Will you join me there? Because together we can do amazing things in our church community. Please know this, believe it, see it, and feel it. I'm here with you, and I would be honored to continue to serve. Oh, I've got 15 more seconds. God, I talked quicker than a New Yorker, didn't I? Sorry, I didn't know that. Well, anyway, I was kind of rushing through that because we only had 3 minutes, but I'm very honored to be here, and thank you very much. And thanks for being here on your Sunday.
Thank you. I'd now like to call up Eric Quam.
Thank you. My name is Eric Quam. I've been a Unity Truth student for more than 30 years. I started going to Unity in New York City, listening to Eric Butterworth in 1987. I met my wife, Michelle, at Unity in New York City. When Michelle and I moved to Hawaii with our 2 children, our 2 adopted children, Erica and Dimitri, the first thing we did was find this church. In 2009, Reverend Sky wrote a letter of recommendation for us so that we could adopt our 3rd child, Anastasia. Michelle and I brought up all 3 of our children in Unity with totally wonderful Unity school teachers for children. When Michelle died in 2013, my children and I, we held her celebration of life at this church right here in this room. So words cannot express the depth of the gratitude for the blessing that this church has been in our lives. The question that I have for you is, what kind of church community do you want? I remember Reverend Sky saying that you can be right or you can be happy, but you can't be both. In my perception, there's been a lot of persons, including myself, who've said, I'm right, we're right, and he or she or they are wrong, and that they are to blame, and that I'm justified in blaming and attacking them because they are wrong. You can have that kind of a community, or you can have a community that's happy, that's thriving, growing, forgiving people. But you can't have both. My commitment to you is to speak the truth about what I personally have experienced, witnessed, or felt, to make the loving decision, to make the forgiving decision, to protect this community, to help heal it, to grow the community, to make decisions based on unity principles of truth, love, trust, and forgiveness, to co-create with you and with God's help the kind of community that we want and that we want to belong to. Thank you very much for your consideration today.
I wish to thank all of the applicants for coming forth and giving us their perspective. As I understand, there will be some other business to be conducted, but in the meantime, if you would, as I think we agreed, write your questions on the piece of paper, and we will have a Q&A at that closing of the other topics of the agenda. So we will proceed, but in the meantime, we'll continue with the agenda. Is that correct?
Excuse me. My name is Kathy Whitmire, and I'm the treasurer, and I was advised that I needed to get up and spend a few minutes talking about the financial report that I handed out earlier in the meeting, and that during the time I was talking that some of you were going to be multitasking because you were going to be writing down questions on that little white sheet of paper. Is that correct? And that when I quit talking, actually Jerry's already collecting them right now. Some of the candidates wanted to take a brief break, and they are certainly welcome to do that. There's no requirement that they stay and listen to what I have to say, which I hope to make relatively brief. Okay, the question was raised that everybody did not have a copy of this 2-page report. There were a bunch of them passed out, but because the person who usually makes sure that every person has exactly the right number is actually a candidate this year, I have not asked her to do that. I was just going to say that we had almost enough, and maybe people would be willing to share with others on the same aisle. But Marcia is running off to get a few additional reports for those of you who want to have one of your very own that you can take home. So, I'm sorry, I blew it. It was Bonita, who is the assistant treasurer, who is so helpful in making these copies for us. Okay, what I have before you today is a letter that I presented on Thursday to the Board of Trustees, summing up the month of January financial statements for the church activities and a few comments about going forward. So I think the important points I want to make are summarized in that letter, but also included in this actual versus budget on the first page, and it's just for the month of January. The board did adopt a month-by-month revenue and expense budget for the church operations. That's a kind of a break-even budget, and I appreciate all the work that they did on that back in December. But the news that I have to report to you today is that our donations for the month of January were almost $10,000 lower than the amount that was budgeted. And the result of that, our expenses were generally in line. Some of our other income items were a little bit higher. So the result for the month of January, you can see where it says net ordinary income, is a deficit for the month of $6,285. And what that means to us is that because we have been going through this transition period, this election period, some disagreements, some conflicts, people have not donated as much as they did January a year ago or January the year before that. So it is the time for all of us who believe in this community to step forward and resume our giving at previous levels or higher so that we will have the funds that are needed to pay for the ongoing operations of this spiritual community and to work through an interim period where we will have very wise advisors such as Nicholas, who is with us today, and others from Unity Worldwide Ministries who can help us through a healing process and make us a stronger community. I didn't know I had a 3-minute limit, but those are the points that I wanted to make, we do have a tight cash flow situation, so as treasurer of Unity Church of Hawaii, I'm asking you to consider making an extra contribution during this month as we're finishing up February so that we can move forward into this interim transition period as a strong community of faith. And there is a balance sheet on the last page. If you want to take a look at that, it hasn't changed a whole lot from previous months. We do still have our significant amount of investments that are part of our permanent endowment fund and that we are not allowed to draw from at this time because we're still saving the earnings on that fund until the $150,000 is paid back that was withdrawn for operating expenses in 2014. But we do have a little over $8,000 in our unrestricted fund and some additional money in funds that were restricted by the donors. So you can see that we are a very blessed church because we have this significant property that's debt-free. We don't owe any obligations, and we do have an endowment that will serve us to keep us in perpetuity. But right now, times are tight, and we need to pull together to move through this interim period. I do have one note about the new committee that's been created by the board to work more closely with Unity School. And we are a few months behind on financial statements from Unity School and have some errors that need to be corrected there. And I'm asking the board committee to work to resolve those issues so I can provide you a full report next month on the church as well as school operations. So I thank you for that. I don't think I'm going to take questions because I have 8 candidates who want to answer questions, but Bonita is going to give you a copy of the report if you'd like to have one at this point. Thank you and blessings to each of you.
Okay, thank you. The nominations committee, I believe, has already given its report. Thank you. The elections committee has decided to waive the report so that we can get straight into Q&A. And so the first question. Okay, this question goes to all of the candidates. Should background checks be mandatory for all candidates and board members? And we will start with, let's see, I need my paper. Well, I'll just keep track of it for now, and I'll find my paper when they're talking. Thank you. Okay. And we will start with Bonita. You have 1 minute to answer that question. Should background checks be, yes, should background checks be asked of all? Followed by Chris. So Chris, if you wanted to come to the microphone. Can we get, do we have soundboard so that, okay.
Hi, I'm Bonita. And personally, I don't think so. But I did what I was supposed to do. I filled out the paperwork for a background check.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Could you repeat the question for clarity?
Yes. Should background checks be mandatory for all candidates and board members?
Absolutely. We have a preschool on campus here, and our licensing requires that we cannot have people with certain histories on our campus. So it's very important. The preschool could lose its licensing. And I think also, I mean, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to have a background check. I have no problem with it. And particularly, I mean, if you're going to be working with the community, be around the children, I think our insurance policy also requires this as well. So I absolutely am in favor of that.
Okay. Next will be Eric and then Latrice. Eric and then Latrice.
didn't
No,
hear.
because they don't always go in the same order.
No, I don't believe that background checks should be required of, was it members or was it?
For all candidates and board members.
Oh, for all candidates and board members. Oh, no, definitely. I mean, what it says is that people that are offering to volunteer their time and energy and services to the church are not to be trusted. I mean, there is a deep sense of distrust in this community. So, no, not at all. Definitely not. Thank you.
For me, I guess you would have to ask what it is that you're looking for when you're looking in a background check. Is it a spiritual representation? Are we going to forgive the person automatically for whatever it is that they've done? Everyone is an ex something, so do you really need a background check? Now, as far as them being next to the children and the insurance, you would have to consider the amount of time that they're next to the children and things like that. But I guess you would have to ask, is it really necessary? And what is it that you're looking for in the background check? So to answer the question specifically, as a board member and being a representation, I would hope that if I'm taking that spiritual path, my background, although important, I would hope that I am forgiven, as I would be a representation of a spiritual awakening and outbringing. So no, but yeah, I'm sorry, that's confusing.
Thank you. Ralph, thank you. Ralph and Richard.
I believe background checks should be done, mostly because the board is your representation. The board has access to information that perhaps another member of the membership does not have access to. And that information that is yours should be guarded safely. Anything that has to do with the children should be guarded safely. And if I have a board that has not been investigated, if you will, for their integrity, then that doesn't make me feel comfortable. So yes, they should be. They should have an investigation.
Thank you.
Background checks, it was requested of me. I applied for it. That's the last I've heard about it. I noticed in the bulletin that background checks have been required for all volunteers. How many months has it been? 9 months? It's been a year? Years, okay. So it's been in there, and they don't seem to have happened because none of the seated board members have had background checks. And let's respect the speaker, please. No calling out. I'd appreciate that. So we've got a preschool, we've got licensing, we've got a democratic process that I think should be involved in this. Is this a board decision? Who decided that these background checks were going to be made for all volunteers? Where did that come from? I don't know. But do I think we should need them in specific situations? Maybe, maybe not. But I'd like to go through the process. Nothing has been brought to the board at all from the preschool ever that I'm aware of requesting background checks.
Okay, thank you. Ricky and Celine.
I'm really used to background checks in my work, and I've passed a couple myself, including a couple of Department of Defense background checks, one of them this year. But that's not the issue, and I'm not the issue. I actually agree with a lot of things that Richard just said. The board has not done its due diligence on the whole subject of background checks. So when the nominating committee asked me to take a background check, I told them in writing consistently that I would, but I wanted to introduce a motion to our board, which I actually have done, so that the board can do due diligence. So I want you to put yourselves in our position. No board member has ever been asked to do a background check, And we're talking about our social security numbers. And the first thing I want to know from a due diligence standpoint is what data is going to be used, how are they going to evaluate it, how's it going to be stored, how's it going to be protected, is an outside HR firm going to store my data, which I would like to do. So I'm theoretically in favor of it after the due diligence. Thank you, Kathy, for holding up the time.
There is a saint and a Satan in all of us. We normally keep that Satan under control, but we don't know when it will blow up. I believe firmly in background check. In fact, in my job, I insisted they do a background check on me, although that wasn't required. We sit with people, we are always very casual and friendly with each other, but really we do not get to know all of them as well as we should. And we are usually on our best behavior here. That does not bring out the Satan in us. And I believe very firmly that a background check is needed. And this is where our vetting process also comes in. And I'm sorry that the vetting process did not exclude some people from getting nominated this time. We've got to make that clearer. I believe background check is essential. Thank you.
Did you want to speak now?
Folks, I just would like to add a comment to this, and believe me, I'm not coming out in favor of one candidate or the other, but I would speak from the point of view of a church administrator. We have to remember that we are a spiritual organization, we are a church, we are also a publicly chartered, not-for-profit religious corporation, and we have statutory requirements. Beyond that, we have liability concerns, very serious liability concerns. I have been in 2 churches over the last several years in which background checks were not performed. Individuals committed, shall we say, erroneous acts, and in both instances the insurance company refused to cover because background checks had not been carried out. Now, I know we don't like to mistrust people, and we're not interested in whether they had a DWI when they were 16, but the fact of the matter is that to protect ourselves as a secular organization is sometimes worth considering background checks. Remember, we are a loving spiritual community. We are also a secular state-licensed organization that has sometimes very serious concerns about liability, insurance liability, and so forth. So I'm not taking a side on this. I'm perfectly happy. I've had background checks, and I think ministers should have background checks, but I'm not taking a side on this. I'm just asking you to consider the 2 roles that our church plays and whether it isn't sometimes prudent to have those background checks from the secular side of our organization. Alas, we are a church, but we're also a business and a public corporation. Thank you.
The next question is a factual question, which I will just answer. How many slots are to be filled? 3. There will be 3 filled. Okay, in this next one, I will call you up. It is to all of you, but the questions are quite long, and the answers are yes or no. So what I will do is call you up, read the question, and we'll go through all of them, and you can answer yes, no, and then and that will be that. Okay, so doing them randomly, Chris and Latrice will be the first 2. I could. Okay, well, yes, then we have to get this one. Okay. Chris and Latrice. The nominating committee asked all applicants to submit to background checks. I would like you to ask each candidate to respond to this question with a yes or no answer. Did you comply with the nominating committee? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Will you be present for all the board meetings?
To the best of my ability, yes.
With proper planning and preparation, yes.
Okay. Kathy, will you support, let me start again. Will you support contracting out the accounting for the preschool as has been done for the church so we can have accurate financial reports each month?
Without the full background on that, I cannot commit to saying yes or no.
Okay. Latrice?
Yes.
So the next two people will be Richard and Salim. Same questions. If you don't mind, I'll abbreviate for some of these. Will you submit to a background check? So, sorry, is it Richard?
Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
It's
Will you be present for all board meetings?
to the best of my ability. I've been to almost every board meeting we've ever had, including the special meetings.
Okay. Will you support contracting out the accounting for the preschool?
That's worked very well for the church. I would highly look at that, but I'm not sure. I would need input and need to know more about the preschool financing and how they work it.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. A man of few words. Okay. Bonita and Eric.
All right.
All right. Would you submit to the background check?
Yes, I've already done that.
Will you be present for all meetings?
Yes.
And do you support contracting out the accounting of the preschool?
I would have to find out much more about it.
Okay. Eric, do you need them repeated? Wait. Did you comply? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Did you comply with the nominating committee request?
I declined the request because the request is not.
Well, no, it was just yes or no.
Excuse me.
All
I
right.
declined because background checks are not required or authorized by state law, unity bylaws, or board policy.
Will you be present for all board meetings?
Certainly, yes.
Will you support contracting out the accounting for the preschool as has been done for the church?
Probably, but it would have to be determined, at a board meeting after discussion.
Okay. So that, Ralph? Wait, I'm missing somebody. Benita, you answered, right? So the next ones
You're missing Ricky.
Benita's been done. So I've got Ralph and Ricky. Ralph and Ricky. Okay, Ralph, did you comply with the nominating committee request regarding background checks?
Yes.
Will you be present for all board meetings?
To the best of my ability, yes.
Will you support contracting out the accounting for the preschool?
With more information to see what the parameters are, yes.
Okay. And the last is Ricky. Did you, did you comply with the nominating committee request regarding background checks?
I think I've already answered that question. I told them yes as soon as the board did its due diligence on my motion.
Will you be present for all board meetings?
I've been present, and so the answer is yes. To the best of my ability, I've been present the last 2 years.
Will you support contracting out the accounting for the preschool as has been done for the church?
After hearing a detailed report from the treasurer and anybody else that needs to make a report, it sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, thank you. Both of these together? No, just one. Okay. All right. We'll do Latrice and Richard. And this is, you may want, let's see. So I read this one for the new? Okay, got it. Okay. If you are a new candidate, which is you, knowing the history of the board discord, how will you monitor your actions in keeping with unity principles and take responsibility?
For me personally, my peace has been a part of my daily practice. And so it is just that it's a practice, regardless if I'm in a room of people who are going through their own things, if I'm alone, if I'm in front of a classroom. The principles that I practice to keep myself at peace will ensure that I can stay that way regardless of what is happening around me. I would hope that I could offer assistance and clarity to those who are going through what it is that they are going through, but I think the main thing is to ensure that I hold true to what my practices are and then be able to share that with those who are willing to listen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Richard? This one says, if you are currently a board member, how will you do things differently if reelected so the same issues of discord don't continue, but stay within unity principles and take responsibility?
Do things differently. I've been advocating for that ever since I got on the board. And what I have done and in the process of doing is promoting membership to the board of individuals that will go for the higher good of the church. There's been quite a history in the past of not following our policies and procedures, so I highly advocate for that. I really would like to see the minister freed up also so that he can spend 80% of his time on the metaphysics, the classes, the book studies, that I think that's where the answer is. There's a spiritual, conscious, foundational problem here, and I really want us to see it get to that. And those are the areas that I keep myself grounded as best as possible. It's a practice, like Latrice says, day after day, moment after moment, and issue after issue. And if you want to be challenged, be a board member, because it builds character.
Thank you. Okay, Salim and then Benita. So we need to have a microphone migration here. Ricky, you're hanging on to yours. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Salim.
Yeah.
You are new, so you get the new question. If you are a new candidate, knowing the history of the board discord, how will you monitor your actions in keeping with unity principles and take responsibility?
Thank you very much for that question. I thrive on challenges, and I'm offering myself for board action because of learning of the discord which has prevailed. As I mentioned before, all of us have saints and satans. There are some ways that we can control the Satan. One of them, for example, is I believe, and I would like to see that all meetings of the board be audio recorded, if not video recorded, and they be made available. I've learned from board members that when there's a general meeting, when others are present, they're on their best behavior. So this incentive will work. And I don't want to sound negative, but I would say that I'm being proactively negative in the sense that I do believe as humans we have failures, and having this audio recording, maybe video recording of all meetings will incentivize us to be on our best behavior all the while. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Benita, and then let's see, following that, Benita will be Ricky and Chris. Okay, Benita, you are a current member. How will you do things differently if reelected so the same issues of discord don't continue, but stay within unity principles and take responsibility?
I'm going to encourage people to take more C classes so they can continue to grow in their spiritual path like me. That's what I think that is very important, because my old way, the shadow way, I guess, I would run away. I ran away from Virginia and I came to here. I have not left. Okay, so this is a big challenge of being on the board. I'm learning about myself. I'm not running away. And so I'm just encouraging people to stay in their truth and their spiritual path and not to run away. And I have 15 seconds left. And so I'm just going to say, let's continue to grow in our spiritual path together.
Okay. Thank you. And now we have Eric and Ralph. Is that right? Thank you. No, I missed Chris. I beg your pardon. Right, Chris. As a new member, knowing the history of the board discord, how will you monitor your actions in keeping with unity principles and take responsibility?
Well, first I would begin with prayer. I always hold the highest and best for this community and those involved in it. The other thing that I would do, I think anyone who has seen me interact in town halls knows that I'm able to do that in a way that is respectful. I give people the benefit of the doubt, but I also hold them accountable for their words and actions. I'm willing to work with people, but I'm not willing for any of us to be walked over. I'm willing to do trainings, whatever it takes, and I'm also willing to work with the congregation to take whatever actions they think may be appropriate. That's what I will say.
Thank you. Next will be Eric and Ralph.
John, could I ask you to repeat the question,
Of course.
please?
If you are a new candidate, knowing the history of the board discord, how will you monitor your actions in keeping with unity principles and taking responsibility?
Well, first of all, the board isn't all discord. I've attended many, many board meetings, and there's been a lot of accord at the board meetings. The second thing is that each of us is responsible for what we think and say and do. And I agree with Latrice. It's up to me to pay attention. Am I to make the loving decision? Am I going to condemn this person for their view, for their different viewpoint? Am I going to forgive them? Can the board come together? Can we lovingly disagree over certain things? The board is always going to have discord if you call discord disagreement. That's its job, is to make decisions. So it's a matter of personal responsibility for me to practice unity principles in making decisions as a board member, and that includes listening respectfully to everyone's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph, because the word reelected is used in one, you will fall under the new candidate category. If you are a new candidate, knowing the history of the board discord, how will you monitor your actions in keeping with unity principles and take responsibility?
Well, I've sing this song from both sides now. So knowing that I've been on the board before and here I am again, I'm thinking that the second unity principle teaches us that we are all created in the image of God. And because God is good, that means we're all inherently good. So in being a new member, I'm not coming with an agenda to point a finger at anyone, to be mean or disrespectful to anyone. My agenda is first to God and to bring this church back to where it should be. So in thinking of everyone that I know on the board now, I look at you the same way I did when I was president and treasurer, with love in my heart.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, we'll start with Salim and Ralph. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Thank you for keeping me honest.
That's okay. It must be quite a job trying to jump around all the names up there.
I am frying here.
Could you read the question? Do you mind?
Yes, I'll be happy to. If you are currently a board member, how will you do things differently if reelected so the same issues of discord don't continue but stay within unity principles and take responsibility?
Those of you that know me well know that I meditate and I do pray regularly. But beyond that, that's easy for me to sit here and say if I don't put it in action. I am deeply concerned over the divide in our church. And one of the practices I do as an individual, and I actually teach it with people I work with, is you can either choose to do this and blame another person for a problem, or I can choose to go home at night, if I get feedback, and do this and ask myself, what can I learn from this? what could I do better tomorrow? I can't change yesterday. None of us can. And the phrase, an easier, softer way, came into my head when Joanne asked the question. I like that phrase. It's from a 12-step program, but an easier, I think we need to be softer with each other. I think we need to stop all the low-level stuff because, folks, we've got light in our hearts, and we all care about this church. So let's work together, and I want to be part of that. So what would I do differently? I would try to be more mindful and put more effort into it. Thank you.
Okay, the next question will start with Salim and then Ralph. How will you foster constructive communication and help a return to it when conflict arises so we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
That's a heavy question. I guess all of us need to go through communication courses, etc. But you know, going back to the saint and Satan in all of us, we need to bring the saint out. This requires, it will vary from question to question. It is my ability to empathize with others, my ability to see the world from the other person's viewpoint, but also my ability to have my strength to tell the other person, thank you very much, but I disagree with you, and this is the solution that I would suggest. So it's very, very much a two-way street. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. You're right on top of it. I think that active listening is a very important part of communication. When you are actively listening to another person, you are literally making yourself available to them to listen to what they're saying, to try to understand what they're saying, and then to communicate it back to them so that they and you can know whether or not you understood what they were talking about, if you just understood what I said. So being able to listen and to communicate with other people and try to see something from their point of view. Maybe on that day they had something happen and what's coming out of them is not exactly what they wanted to portray to you, but try to understand that and be in the moment. Thank you.
Okay, the next two, thank you, Ralph, will be Chris and Ricky. Do you want the question again? Okay. How will you foster constructive communication and help a return to it when conflict arises so we can keep a good minister for more than 2 years?
Well, for one thing, I would speak with the minister on a regular basis to see how he's doing. That's something that this board seems to have failed to do when he clearly stated multiple times in his senior minister reports at board meetings that he was seriously concerned about the way he was being treated. I have asked why board members did not try harder to connect with him. I could have told you a year and a half ago that he was very concerned and unhappy, and the recordings of those board meetings exist. So I definitely would listen to the concerns and hear them and bring them to the rest of the board, because I do care about people and empathize with them. Thank you.
You want the question repeated? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
How will you foster constructive communication and help a return to it when conflict arises so we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
Well, as I've said in a couple of other ways today, I deeply am concerned about the rift in the church, and I think we haven't done such a good job collectively. I'm going to include me and everybody in building relationships. When we've got a congregation where people are being attacked and blamed for things, to me, that's not spiritual. So I would like to, if reelected to the board, I would like to take even more opportunities to remind people, hey, it's fine to disagree. Like one of you said, that's part of board service. It's okay to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. But we really need to disagree with respect. And There's a 12-step program that uses the phrase principles above personalities, and I really think we need to jump into that fifth principle of unity and really walk that talk, and like Ralph was saying, active listening. So I think there are a number of things we can do. I mean, we can have trainings, but to me it comes down to what happens with me and you, and we all need to try harder with each other, and as a board member, I give you my word, I would try harder.
Thank you. The next two are Latrice and Bonita. Latrice, how will you foster constructive communication and help her return to it when conflict arises so we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
Okay. This week I had the opportunity to teach 50 fifth graders at Waikiki Elementary about the Middle Passage. It is not an easy subject to have to communicate to a culturally diverse group of children. One thing that I did do is I brought in theater and I created a space of anonymity for the people so that they could voice their concerns and not feel subjected to being judged or even know who was having difficulty. It was more about, we separated the group into red, orange, green, and blue, and we played a game. Now, however immature it might be, it works. It is an icebreaker, creating a space where you can voice your concerns, fully communicate, and play, I have found helps. So I would bring something like that.
Okay. Bonita, do you want me to read the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, how will you foster constructive communication and help her return to it when conflict arises so that we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
The way I would do it is, personally, I wouldn't respond quickly just because I'm thinking something to blurt it out. I learned that that's not good. And then I like to add a sense of humor, a little bit of humor. And then I would like to say that I'm going to communicate much more with the minister. Check on him, see how he's doing, he or she, to see how they're doing. And communication is very important. I just think it's how you present it, how it comes out. Because anything can be said, it's how you say it. And be respectful. I am very mindful for myself of speaking up, but then I watch what I say. At least I try to, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then concluding with Richard and Eric. Richard, how will you foster constructive communication and help her return to it when conflict arises so we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
I love this question. It has a positive angle to it. It moves us forward in helping to solve and resolve some of the issues that we have here at the church. I think training is really important. I'd love to see some training programs ongoing when possible. And then in additional to that, a forum for practicing it. And one great forum would be our board talk. We've now established board talk. And when we go back and forth, perhaps with some facilitation, that could be training forums for effective communication with each other. And one thing that I would really like to highlight is there was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, if any of you are familiar with that. One of those habits was to seek to understand. When someone says something, go ahead and seek to understand and understand them clearly. I've seen a number of times a pattern of actually people coming to conclusions without actually checking with the other person. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, how will you foster constructive communication and help her return to it when conflict arises so we can keep good ministers for more than 2 years?
Well, in one word, it's practice. I recall Reverend Sky giving this talk. He gave it more than once, talking about the 3 C's of complaining, condemning, and criticizing. And and the challenge was to do that, to refrain from doing that for 21 days. I tried. I never made the 21 days. But when I hear the condemnation, the criticism, or the complaining coming at me, what I do is I try to move to a place of, okay, I'm not going to react to this. I'm not going to judge the person. I'm just going to, accept that this is what's happening. And by the same token, when I find myself doing the same thing or thinking of uttering the condemning, the complaining, the criticizing statement, it's up to me, in my practice, to stop and not do that. To stop and listen and find a place, again, of forgiveness and unity principles. Thank you.
All right, the next question, we will begin with Latrice and Ralph. How comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or altercation?
I'm very comfortable. I don't mind at all acknowledging where I'm at fault, where I'm right, where there's an opportunity to improve. I'm looking for that type of experience as I grow, so I'm very comfortable.
I think that part of the growth process is being able to acknowledge when you are when you're not right, and being able to accept loving accolades when you're right and people do agree with you. Some people have trouble both ways, either accepting criticism or accepting praise. So I remember someone said to me today that they would not be interested in voting for me because of things that I've done on the board in the past. And that's okay, because I know that I can't do or say everything that someone else wants to hear or to be done. So I will be the first to be the harshest critic. When I look in the mirror, I'm looking at myself. I'm not looking at anyone else.
Thank you. The next two are Richard and Eric. And I'll repeat the question. How comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or altercation?
Actually, I look forward to resolving issues like that, so I'm very comfortable. And what I look forward to is the mutual respect and the understanding. And, we're all one. We're all in the same boat. And I really think gaining those skills, getting away from the shadow sides of ourselves, and we all do suffer from that from time to time, is really, really important. And that's part of the spiritual solutions, I think, that are part of why we're here. Our vision, it's consciousness, to spread it in the world. So that's a very necessary part, and that's an area I'm fascinated by. I really like that. It has to do with metaphysics and training and learning and practice, a day-to-day practice. Thank you.
Okay, the next, Eric,
Yes.
sorry. Eric,
Could you repeat
how
it, please?
comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or an altercation?
Well, it's very similar to the last question, which is, it's a matter of work and practice. It's also important, especially I see this, of course, with my children. It's like when they're saying, or when I'm in an altercation with them, it's like, okay, they're not wrong. They're just making a mistake, or I'm just making a mistake. And so I'm perfectly, I'm like Richard. I'm glad to understand when I've made a mistake and to acknowledge it, because that's how I grow. It's by learning from mistakes. It's that simple. Thank you.
Okay, next up will be Chris, followed by Ricky. Chris, how comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or altercation?
Absolutely 100%. I take full responsibility for my words and actions. And I'd also just say I'm happy to answer any oral questions as long as you guys want to after the meeting's over.
Thank you. Ricky?
To me, I don't need to be, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't hear. To me, I don't need to be comfortable, but I need to be committed to doing that. And I am 100% committed. Philosophically, as a human being, before I even come to Unity, I'm not going to grow if I'm addicted to being right all the time. And I'm not addicted to being right all the time. There are board members I work with that will tell you that. I am open to change and new ideas. So I think I would like to be growing when I'm in my 80s and 90s if I live that long. And the only way I'm going to do it is if I've got some resilience and I can embrace the conflict. So I don't like conflict. I don't think anybody in this room really likes it. But I think conflict is an amazing opportunity. I think we have an amazing opportunity here to reconnect with one another, but we've got to do the work and we've got to do the commitment. And I am 100% committed to doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last two on this question, Salim and Bonita. Salim, how comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or altercation?
Thank you very much. You know, this question reminded me of the movie Gandhi. There was one particular episode that is in my mind. A person comes to Gandhi and said, I have killed this Muslim boy's mother and father. I didn't know that they had a child. What should I do with this child? Gandhi said, you've got to raise him up as a Muslim and move forward with that. That has been stuck in my mind since long. And the fact that all of us as humans have failings is good in a way, but it's acknowledging the failings and trying to move forward with that. My actions in the All Believers Network and Milan and other groups that I founded and working with others were all started by the realization that I may have committed faults that I should rectify. Thank you.
Okay, Bonita, how comfortable are you with acknowledging your part in a miscommunication or altercation?
I'm very comfortable. I will express it verbally. I will text you. I will email you. I would even come and talk to you personally. I'm big on communication. I don't have a problem with that. Since I've been on my spiritual path, I have learned so much about myself, the part that you don't really want to tell people about, that I'm scared of everything. Oh, I just told you. Oh, but I've learned is that growth that I admit to. Okay, I'm 61, and I keep telling my father I am going to act mature next week or next month. Okay, but we're still working on that. That's my spiritual path.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question, and the first two responders will be Richard and Salim. Okay, the question is, are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that this church meets its legal obligations?
Legal obligations and emotional challenging? That's an interesting question. To me, it doesn't equate. What I'm thinking is, you meet the legal obligations of the church in an unemotional way. I don't consider it actually, it's not an emotional challenge for me. It may be for some individuals, but it's not for me. You look at the information, you gather the facts, you seek to understand, and you just come together and make a good, solid decision based on what the greater good is for the church. And to me, it's not an emotional experience. There might be conflict. There might be other people that are going to try to maneuver and get you to go over to their way. And I've seen some things that weren't too pretty sometimes. But that part is more challenging. But the decision itself, I think for me, it's pretty straightforward when you're dealing with, you mentioned items as finances, right?
It just said legal obligation. It didn't specify finances.
Okay.
Salim?
I applaud the level of questions that are being asked. Thank you very much. None of us is perfect, and therefore we seek information from others. One thing that I would like to bring is the question of having an ombudsman who can act as the intermediary between the senior minister and us. As I mentioned earlier, I really applaud the fact that Reverend Tim kept all that grief inside him because he did not have anyone to share that with. We should create this position of an ombudsman who can then respond and create and sort of work with the minister on one side and the congregation on the other side. But this is certainly a very important and emotional issue, requires serious thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Latrice and Chris. Latrice, are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
Yes, I am willing to do the work. I would invite everyone to do the work. And as far as emotions and finances, it seems, we're either on one side of the scale or the other. When we have a lot of money, we feel really good, and we go out and we spend it. But when we're struggling, we have on the other side of the scale where we're not feeling so good. So maybe looking at our emotional attachment to finances and getting into a space of abundance so that, we are feeling good and we're moving forward as the community.
Okay, Chris, do you want the question again? Okay. Are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
The church must always meet its legal obligations. I have no problem with that. If there's an emotional component to that, I'm happy to work with people's emotions. I have no problem dealing with emotions, different ideas, different peoples, different personality types. I'm happy to work with people and sit with people. Many of you know I do chaplaincy. I have no problem sitting with the hardest emotions. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you. The next two are Ricky and Ralph.
And the question is, are we willing to do the emotionally challenging work of
making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
Well, for the past 2 years, I think I've been engaged in that work actively. My parents raised me that openness and transparency is not a dirty word. And the church actually has been out of compliance with certain legal statutes and things to do with the Unity School financials. And what I would like to do is continue to be part of the solution with everyone to get everything in the light, because I think when everything gets in the light, we can exhale. And I don't see it as a scary thing. I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a positive thing. I don't know why some people seem to be afraid of it, but we've had a lot of roadblocks and a lot of unexpected obstacles. But we've been trying, and I think we're making progress. So the short answer is yes, and the longer answer is that, sometimes people on the board have been criticized for asking for accountability and transparency, and I've seen 2 other boards members driven away, and I guess I'm going to sit here and tell you I see this as a good thing. I think it's positive and an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final 2 would be Benita and Eric. Oh, Ralph. Wait, where are you on my list, Ralph? I'm so sorry. Ralph, are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
Yes. Being on the board for 6 years, whatever outcomes came about, certainly intentions were there for the legal obligations to be met, and there is a certain amount of emotional challenges, perhaps, that come along with this because you want to see your community survive and thrive. So, yes.
Thank you. And I realized checking my list that, Benita, you were overlooked, were you not? Or did you answer this one?
I answered in my mind.
Would you like to answer?
Okay, so we can move on.
Answer to the group?
Oh, okay.
Are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
Yes, I am willing to do the emotional work for the challenges and for the church to meet its goals. I think it's very important that we create this environment so that it's not going to be a lot of friction and negativity, but we're going to create it so that it is going to be met and we're going to be happy. I mean, but we have to get to that point of everybody working together. We have to work together on this.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got everybody now, right? I'm probably
Eric.
getting tired.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, Eric. Okay. Sorry, I thought I was so done. I put the question. Are you willing to do the emotionally challenging work of making sure that the church meets its legal obligations?
Yes, certainly. The emotionally challenging part, well, if it's emotionally challenging for me, it's up to me to take care of that. That's my business. And it's also up to me to recognize if it's emotionally challenging to someone else on the board and to, again, be respectful, listen, come from a point of view of unity principles, practicing forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We will begin with Eric and Ricky. Please say a few words about your shadow and how you deal with it.
That's a great question, actually. As a student of psychology, I actually like the question. I journal. I have been journaling for many, many years. I teach my clients to journal, but I'm the kind of human being, those that know me well, I will not, what's the saying? I practice what I preach, and I would never sell something I hadn't used myself. So I have found journaling to be really an amazing entryway into my shadow. I also meditate. I meditated last night, had a great meditation. Sometimes it works better than others. And for those of you that meditate, you'll understand that statement. I go through a and this has happened to me almost intuitively my whole life. Every year in December, and this isn't something that comes from my head, ever since I was a little girl, it's almost like a seasonal thing. I go through this deep period of evaluation, and it's automatic, and it's really helpful to me to go through that time of reflection. So thank you for the question, and thank you.
Okay, Eric, I think I skipped over you inadvertently. Please say a few words about your shadow and how you deal with it.
Oh, yeah, I have a shadow. Everyone does. We come equipped with one. I tend to think of the shadow, and I recall Reverend Tim's talk a couple of weeks ago about that. It's the ego. And, it's necessary because we go through life constantly making decisions. So when I think of the shadow, I think, okay, what decision am I going to make in this moment? What's the loving decision? What's the truthful decision? And what's the right decision? Sometimes the decisions are wrong, and if I make a mistake, then it's up to me to recognize and learn from that. So, it's just, I think, acceptance and acknowledgement that it exists, that it serves us, but it's not our master. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ralph and Richard. And the question is, Ralph, you got it? You've got a good memory, probably because you're a singer.
Thank you. I guess the best way I can describe this is last week I was faced with a certain issue. And when I got up in the morning, the first thing that I remember saying is, "Be still and know that I am God." I repeated that phrase throughout the entire day. My shadow meet my God.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, I
Richard?
don't need the question read either. But shadow, yeah, shadow is there. And my gosh, 20 years ago, I read a book called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Empak. Wow, what a spiritual experience that was. Felt like I was shot out of a cannon, and I haven't stopped yet. There are shadows. I have worked with my own shadow. I'm not the same person today I was 20 years ago, or even maybe last week. There's always work to be done. Well, how to do that, though? I mean, it's all about awareness. So, Jesus said, there are those that look but don't see, and those that are listen but do not hear. What was he pointing towards? When you're on the inside looking out, it's sometimes kind of hard to know, yeah, it's you. So awareness can be a tough item. But to try to see the unseen, to ask the questions, to ask my part in it, to ask how something feels and how could I make it better. And contemplative prayer is really a great tool. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next two are Salim and Latrice. Salim, I'll repeat the question because they're passing down the microphone. Please say a few words about your shadow and how you deal with it.
The best person to recognize my shadow is my wife. It is so wonderful. When I go, for example, she must be watching this movie and she'll tell me, you did this wrong and you did that wrong. So I rely heavily on her. She has improved my speaking, my gestures, my arguments so very much. And it's wonderful. So I do have a partner who keeps track of my shadow and helps me master over them all the while. Thank you very much.
All right. For me personally, where I am on my journey, I have had to learn to love my shadow and accept it as a part of me. One of the ways that I do this is I perform. I write music. I do hip hop. I teach classes. I teach young children how to express and emote, not hide from themselves. It takes a bigger person to accept, yes, this is who I am, and I'm going to own that side of me. So that's a big part of who I am. It's just owning my shadow, owning my light, and then being that best person, not denying myself at all.
Thank you. And then finally, Chris and Bonita.
Well, I really like the quote, nothing human is alien to me, and I know under the right circumstance, anyone is capable of anything. And I truly believe that most people do not do things because they really are trying to do the right thing or the best thing. It's not always the case. For me, I certainly have had my shadow work. I came from a very abusive family and began court-appointed therapy at the age of 5. So I've spent most of my life in different forms of therapy, working out issues and looking deeply at my part in things and other people's parts as well. And as Latrice said, I can own my shadow and love myself and forgive other people.
Thank you.
I love this question. For me, my shadow was every time I got scared, I would always want to run away and cry and take the abuse or the insults or the threats. And then I discovered I don't have to stand there, sit there, be there to allow that. And I would say no more, and I would walk away. And I've learned to do that. I've learned to walk away. Just because someone else is in a bad way that I can't understand, it does not mean I have to respond to every ugliness that comes towards me, because it's not about me, it's them. And so that's the reason why, 15 seconds left, that's the reason why I love volunteering because volunteering takes it off of me and puts it on other people. I'm trying to make them happy.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to have a few concluding words from the interim minister, and then we will formally close. I understand that some people may want to stay. I personally am obligated to do other things. So why don't we close this up now, and then we'll figure out who's going to take my role, who's going to stay, and so on, and we'll do that. Does that sound good? Okay.
I don't like handheld mics, as you can tell. I'm somewhat expressive. I want to thank personally these good people for having been very candid and to have expressed their opinion. There's no doubt they could be of great service, and some of them will be of great service to our church. I would like to point out, too, that the fact that there are 2 additional candidates here this afternoon does not reflect in any way, as I understand it, any kind of repudiation of the choices made by your nominating committee. These 2 individuals, additional individuals, are members in good standing. They have indicated their desire to be nominated and seconded from the floor when we have our annual meeting, and there seems to be absolutely no reason why they can't sit here this afternoon and answer your questions. But let me say again, our thanks are due to that nominating committee. Our thanks are due to the election committee, and I think we have a wonderful slate here of potentially very, very supportive candidates. I would like to make another couple of points very, very quickly. I detest hierarchies, quite personally. It may have been because my father told me, and he was a 19th century figure, he said, remember, nobody is above you and nobody is below you. We are on the level. So that's why I eschew all titles when I'm in a church. I'm one of you. I'm Nicholas. But I don't think you can automatically accord a minister respect unless that person does earn it. I don't believe that we should accord automatic deference, shall I say, to anyone who presents with a title. I believe they have to earn it. And I believe there are ministers out there who well understand this truth and will earn the respect of the board and of the congregation for which they work. Let me make one other very, very quick point. A church is like a 3-legged stool. The membership, undoubtedly, it holds the residue, nasty word here, residue of power. You do. You have the power as members of a not-for-profit publicly chartered corporation. You have the power to elect these good people, or some of them, to office. It's considerable power. We call it representative democracy in our country. And sometimes we elect to office people to represent us who are not worthy. We hope that they are. In this instance, we trust all of these people are worthy to represent us or you as members. I believe that to be the case. I hope and trust it is. The second leg of the stool is the minister. The minister is indubitably the employee of the board. It says so in the bylaws. Any minister who thinks he or she employs the board is in for a very severe shock. I have seen ministers vacate their positions within 24 hours when the board decided that they were not suitable. That doesn't mean that the board should exercise Hitlerian capacities and become dictators. It doesn't mean either that a minister should assume those qualities either. There has to be a working in harmony. Board and minister must work together. I have been in ministry I was ordained in 1968 by Lowell Fillmore, the son of the founders. I have served in nearly 50 different churches, and the minute board and minister cease to communicate, or when there is antipathy or animosity between them, your church is gone. at least spiritually and emotionally, if not literally. The board and the minister must work together. Sometimes one gets its own way, sometimes the other. But if they don't communicate, then we are lost. Let us hope and pray that these good people, those of them at least who are elected to the board, will well understand that there is a symbiosis there, that board and minister must work amicably together. And the staff, of course, they're the sort of the seat on which the three legs are attached, because it's your staff who keep the church running. And they should receive our respect and our attention and our consideration at all times. We must be fair, just and equitable employers, and we are, I trust. So that's my take on the situation. I thank you again for coming this afternoon as members. We're going to have our annual meeting soon, and some of these people will be elected to serve. Let's make this as fair and as non-confrontational a process as we can, because the board that sits after the next few weeks is going to be the board that is going to see you into your future and is going to find the kind of minister with whom they can work and who will be willing to work with them to start realizing the potential that this church actually has. Does anyone have a question for me? Please. Yes.
And I just wanted a clarification. If the church council affirmed the ability of the nominating committee to disqualify candidates, on what authority does the board have to overturn that decision?
It's not overturning it. It's choosing. Let me say again, we have apples and oranges here. The nominating committee can and does choose whom it wishes, and they follow certain criteria and they make their recommendations. The two individuals who were not chosen by the nominating committee are entitled to stand because they are members in good standing, and they have already, I believe, indicated their wish to be nominated and seconded from the floor. I believe they already have proposers and seconders from the floor. So they're going to run anyway. It's not a question of fairness. It's a question of something that the nominating committee has done, and for which we are extremely grateful. These people worked very, very hard to do their due diligence. It doesn't mean that the two people who were not chosen by them are in any sense reprehensible. It was that the nominating committee didn't feel that they were as qualified, possibly, as others. I don't know what criteria they used to establish that decision. But these two individuals are members in good standing with every right to seek to be elected to the board. So it's not a question of ignoring or dismissing. They're two separate issues, do you see?
I see the... Sorry.
Please. Go ahead.
I don't know if I have any issues with those particular people. What my question is, on what authority? I mean, I thought that the church paid for counsel to actually determine what is the actual rule here. The council said that the nominating committee actually, the decision rests with them. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, so I'm wondering if this election is even fair.
Well, the decision rests with the membership. I mean, these two people, these two individuals are seeking to stand, as the bylaws prescribe, as independent members in good standing. They can do that.
But the nominating committee, it rests with them. I understand that's what the council said.
Well, there was some ambiguity in that. Let me say, I don't have the letter here. I have read it. We have attorneys here who can perhaps give us a more stringent opinion. But my view personally was that we were dealing with two distinct issues here. Two individuals who are going to stand anyway.
Well, but the whole point of vetting would be to vet out. I mean, I don't know the reasoning or rationale behind the nominating committee. I have read the council's letter. And it seemed to me clear that the nominating committee actually did have the authority. And I wonder on whose authority that's been overridden.
It hasn't been overridden. It hasn't been overridden. The board took a separate decision on a Thursday night to allow these two individuals to exercise their prerogative to stand as, I would say, independent members in good standing, which they're going to do anyway.
But doesn't all members who want to run have to be vetted? I mean, if you hypothetically commit a murder and don't go through the normal, you don't put your name in the hat, but you do the day of the election or whenever is appropriate, that person still has to be vetted.
Well, that's a problem probably you should raise in connection with our bylaws, because when we have the AGM, we could get 25 people from the floor, stand up as these two people intend to do, seek a proposer and a seconder, and stand for office. It's a little bit late then to propose a background check, is it not?
Well, it is, except that these people actually were vetted.
No.
And the nominating committee took them off.
Yeah,
and then somebody had no authority to put them back on. The board has no authority to do that, as I understand.
The board can't stop independent members in good standing from running for office.
It says the council says so.
If you want to make a legal issue of this, my dear friend, please do so. I am not a lawyer, and I have no intention of being at this late stage in life. But if you would like to find an opinion, my experience with attorneys, and I appreciate them greatly, we have one or two floating around here, is that you can usually get another opinion from another attorney if you're willing to pay for the privilege.
Or you could disregard your counsel.
What?
Or the board can disregard their counsel.
I don't know.
No, I'm neither an employee nor a member.
Then may I say that with all due respect, we can't entertain your opinion here
That's
this
fine.
afternoon. Thank you for making it. I beg your pardon? Congregants have always been able to speak, but we can't entertain your opinion formally because
I understand.
that you're not a member. But
I understand.
Eric, I have just thanked him. I have just thanked him for his opinion, and I really appreciate it. But since you're not a member, you can't exercise perhaps the degree of impact that you would like. So
I understand.
my advice to you is join the church, and then.
Thank you.
I really would like to close the meeting out for now because there are some people who I am sure have planned their afternoons around this ending at 3 p.m. Then those of you who wish to stay can do so. But we're clearly getting into an agenda that will be non-ending. So therefore, would you like to give us a closing prayer and allow a few minutes for people to migrate one way or the other?
I just want to let the people whose questions were not asked know that we got through all but one of the questions that were asked to all of the candidates. And that's how it stands, is that we ran out of time.
Well, all I can say is we've probably done our best, and I'm sure in some way or another we may well have fallen short, and I apologize for that. No process of this sort is ever entirely satisfactory or proper, but we've done our best. I think you can say for our board and for these good people here, the intent is what matters, and I think by and large, as I understand it, the intent is to secure the future of this community. If we don't start pulling together to do that, I assure you we're not going to have a community. I represent Unity Worldwide Ministries as I stand here this afternoon, and I can tell you right here and now that they're not going to authorize you